Thank you for your attendance here today. This is for the ordinance amending the administration code to establish an emergency interagency fire safety task force to review and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on proposed legislation and suggest other solutions to improve fire safety in multi-unit residential and multi-use buildings. This is ordinance number 9015. The purpose of the ordinance is to review and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on legislation proposed by the board to improve fire safety in multi-unit residential and multi-use buildings, to suggest to the Board of Supervisors amendments to the municipal code and other solutions that would improve fire safety in multi-residential and multi-use buildings, including but not limited to fire prevention measures, post-fire investigation, processing and resolution of complaints about code violations, and interagency coordination and information sharing, and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on the availability of requiring the installation of fire alarms and sprinklers in existing buildings. So that was what the task force was created for. Thank you for your prior attendance. And the agenda today, we're going to have, I don't know if everyone got the agenda. We have some issues on the agenda, and what we'll do after every agenda, we'll take public comment, and public comment will be for 3 minutes. And thank you for the past, the Fire Safety Task Force meeting. We had some good suggestions that came from that meeting, and we welcome your suggestions today. So, myself, I'm Dan Laurie, Deputy Director, Inspection Services.
James Matsu, Acting Chief Housing Inspector, sitting in for Rosemary Bosky.
Rich Brown Fire Department.
I'm Dave Briggs. I'm the local and regional water system manager for San Francisco PUC. Morning.
Okay, we have a quorum here. Would you like to make an introduction to yourself? Go around the room just so everybody knows each other.
Ron Allen, Chief Electrical Inspector.
Joseph Yu, I'm Technical Service Division.
I'm Tom Lockridge from the City Attorney's Office.
I'm Janann New, representing the San Francisco Apartment Association, residential rental landlords in San Francisco.
GDOT with the Mission SRO Collaborative.
Charlie Goss, San Francisco Apartment Association.
Tim Carrico, our building owner.
I'm Jim Reed with Century Electric, does a lot of smoke detector work. I'm also a member of the Code Advisory Committee and Chairman of the Housing Code Committee.
Bernadette Perez, Department of Building Inspection.
Nicole Lucie, Department of Building Inspection.
Mickey Jones, Fire Department.
Robert Bowlers, Housing Inspector.
Okay. Item number 3, what we're going to talk about today is the multi-unit residential and multi-use buildings, the greatest risk of fire safety hazards, and discussion and possible action regarding development of a database criteria.
Sure. Don't mind me.
Yep.
So, task force is charged with determining which type of buildings provide more of a risk towards fires and displacement from fires. Some of the ideas that were thrown around in the last meeting included type 5 buildings, type 3 buildings, a lot of wood frame buildings, 12 units and higher. And so the chair, Rosemary Bosky, was looking to the Department of Building Inspection, MIS division, to come up with a round number of what the ballpark is that we're talking about for looking into some more safety measures for those types of buildings.
Okay. So what we'd like to do is have the discussion today on the fire alarm system requirements for what we have for existing and what we see could be an issue that we want to bring up. And
before we move on to moving on to item 4, so we should take public comment on item 3 before we move on to the next one.
Okay, is there any public comment on item 3?
discussed it yet. Before discussing it,
For discussing it, yes.
another comment when we're discussing it.
Okay. Okay, the fire, item 4, review of fire alarm system requirements. Discussion and possible action related to initial analysis here.
We had a meeting talking about different kinds of fire alarm systems. A couple of the issues that arose were the 16-unit threshold for UL certification. Also the, what they call the pillow test. If you look at your matrix on the second page, the first item says location of audible devices. All audible devices shall be installed in an approved location and shall emit a loud continuous alarm, clearly audible in all occupied areas of the building. But the truth is that some of these alarm systems are not located within the units, they're in common areas of buildings, especially where the sound is coming from. And so a 75 decibel level for our occupancies in a bedroom, is that sound getting to the bedroom? And Robert, you could elaborate a little bit on what you and I were discussing the other day.
Just a lot of the older systems, you have a bell in the hallway, and especially in places that are noisy, there's the concern that the bell's not reaching the bedrooms, which could be behind several walls. The ambient noise level, depending on where you are in town, can be pretty high. And nobody's really testing. I mean, when they test, they're not really testing that the sound's getting into the bedroom with these old systems. With some of the newer systems, there are some places where they're putting in horns in the bedrooms. They're doing what they call a pillow test, where basically they're checking for 75 dB in the bedrooms, just to make sure that it's enough to wake somebody up if they're sleeping. So, you know, we would like to see more of that, I think is what we're talking about. Maybe upgrading some of these old systems where, you know, if you're awake or if your door's open, you won't have a problem, but in the middle of the night, it might be an issue.
Okay, part of the problem on these prior fires, you know, we've heard that, you know, a lot of times the occupants didn't hear the fire alarm. You know, somebody knows there's a fire, they go from door to door, they don't hear the audibility of a fire alarm. That was one of the suggestions Jim Breed brought up here last time, and we were looking at that item there and figuring that part of the problem is how to upgrade these old alarm systems, fire panels, these central systems, and how to modify them and how to, you know, see if they could handle more alarms or horns or strobes. And maybe Ron Allen, Chief Building Inspector or Chief Electrical Inspector, will talk about that.
Yeah, I want to hear what some of the owners have to say as well. But the bottom line of a lot of the fires is a single biggest complaint that comes into the electrical inspection division is we didn't hear the alarm. Single biggest complaint. It happens all the time. So the question is, how do we rectify that problem? Now, in new construction, it's fairly easy to do. You know, building a brand new system, they already know they have to have the 75 dBs at the pillow, which is referred to as the pillow test. That's easy to build in. Now, when we're dealing with the existing structures, this is a little more difficult. Many of them just have a bell. Depending upon how many units you have and how long the hallway may be, you may not even be close to 75 or the so-called pillow test. So, in a discussion I've had with housing, what I've suggested is that where there is an alarm system presently in the building that does not meet this criteria, there's a couple of different ways to do it. One is to add horns or bells to increase the ability in an alarm condition for that to be heard. Now, it's not always as simple as that. Sometimes it may require a front-end upgrade to bring the capacity of the existing alarm system in compliance with the code to allow for these audible devices to do their job. Because a lot of these systems, and I haven't been in the field for a couple of years, but I used to look at these things, and a lot of them just simply didn't have, we use the term juice, to run these devices in the present configuration of the system. Now, a front end is not prohibitively expensive. You're looking at, maybe Jim might be able to speak to this better than I can, depending upon the system, $2,000 to $5,000 to normally get your front end up and running. And I'm not talking about wiring in the field. I'm just talking about a brand new panel that has the capacity to run what's needed to get the alarm to penetrate into all of the units. But I believe that's one of the first orders of business, is for each building to see if they have that capacity. If they don't, what does it take to get there?
Jim would like to comment on that.
Okay, are we talking about all the buildings that are more than 5 units? Because many of the buildings that are, I'm going to say, non-UL, less than 16, there's a severe lack of audibility in the buildings. But the system's probably, one, I was going to suggest changing the bells to horns, because that would not necessarily trigger a system upgrade because of compatibility. And a lot of the systems could add additional ones on their same system and not overload the notification circuit. But each of these, depending upon the size of the building, gets into issues. Now, and then it's a matter of whether the commission wants to compromise the 75 dB requirement, which could help ease the existing system into compliance. But if you're going to go by the strict letter of the code, and the code now requiring the low frequency horns in the bedrooms, there isn't going to be any existing system that's going to be able to handle that. And then you're into for sure an entirely new upgrade of the fire alarm system. Now, I can tell you right now, we've been changing systems like for like. I'm going to say we've done smaller buildings, 12-unit buildings, I won't say not non-UL, but I'm saying your typical 12-unit building, and it's costing about $10,000 to do with permitting and with plans, as a rule of thumb. Now, I haven't done anything huge like that, like for like.
I should know this, but I can't remember. Are those systems low voltage or 110 to the bells? And
They're low voltage.
but they're in conduit or whatever.
Well, the existing systems,
Yeah.
most of them are low voltage, but there are some 110 volts,
12 volts.
12, 24, 6.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, that's all over the board.
But the piping is consistent,
Yes,
so the wires can be pulled.
yes. The answer to that is yes. Because of our codes requiring the conduit system, at least you have that going for you.
Do you know how much louder horns are than bells, just in the same position?
Okay, technically speaking, I can't tell you, but being on site, I think it's twice as loud personally. And like it's been said, there's some buildings that have one bell on every floor. There's no way that's it. And there may be other ways to do it by adding more horns, not only on the main corridors, but on back stairs. Each one is going to be its own unique self. How we approach it, I'm not quite sure. But
Right. That's why we're just trying to get suggestions, because we know a lot of these systems are old systems and how to adapt them. I mean, it's kind of like a case-by-case basis, but there is, what's good to know, there is some upgrades that could do to the panel, and there is some power supply they could add to it to help upgrade that system, which is good, and that's why we're having this discussion here. I think this is a good start.
right.
You know, on a system
and just
here.
from my perspective, I'm not one of these short-term people. These systems have been in for 30 years now, and some of them are starting to fail. So they have to have some sort of change. So it wouldn't be out of the question to say, okay, in order to provide additional audibility, the requirement to change the panel may not be the worst thing in the world for the owner in the long run. Because essentially that's what I'm doing on the like for like anyway. But I'm just not increasing the audibility. And this is just a matter of getting a panel that you can have more notification circuits or whatever. The labor's still the same. Panel costs a little more, but in the long run, it's not the end of the world.
Now, when you put these new panels in here, are you able to tap into the existing wiring system
Yes.
for the audibility for the bells and stuff like that? It's not
Yes.
be rerouting wires you could actually use what's there and just modify the existing system?
That's correct.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yes.
think conceptually we can work with like for like replacement as long as the issue of audibility is addressed. So we're not talking about adding smoke detectors. I shouldn't even bring up the term damage, because we're talking about much larger structures than we're talking about here. But basically, in terms of devices, the only thing I would envision that you might have to do is add your horns. I did have a question for you that I think could work in some things. We have things called booster panels. And the thing that's good about a booster panel is that if the system's not too old, instead of a front end upgrade, you might be able to put booster panels and increase the audibility without having, in certain cases, to upgrade the front end panel. That's another option depending upon the condition of the building that might be available to you.
The answer is yes. But again, each one you have to take to see which is the best approach. Now, the only thing I will qualify about being able to use the existing wiring is that we need additional notification circuits in order to provide that audibility. Now we will have to pull in more wires through the system. But again, for a typical 12, 16 unit building, it's not the end of the world, but it does add cost to it. Everything always adds a little bit of cost.
Question.
Okay.
So if you're putting horns in, to beat the audibility level, would you recommend horns in all the units in those size buildings?
Again, I can't answer that because I go back to a lot of the buildings are not insulated. I mean, they're not constructed the same way our new buildings are, so sound will carry a lot further in a lot of the buildings. So just by putting horns and maybe additional ones in the public corridors could provide that. I mean, we're talking about a one-unit building or a unit or a studio. You have a horn outside of it, it's going to penetrate. Or put one just inside the unit is another compromise, not putting it in the bedroom, but at least getting one in the unit from the public corridor.
Some units are very long and just have the front like a staircase, and then a really long like a railroad style. If you're in the back of that unit.
I'll try to answer that question. I think the best way to look at that, because that's a legitimate question, is it's building specific. And that is, the goal is to reach the audibility level. How you get there is building specific. And I wouldn't want to mandate something in every single unit because in many cases you don't need that. Then you might have a situation where you have the unit that you've described where you might need something to do. So I think the goal is to reach the audibility level and look at each building to determine how is that possible to do.
Rich, would you like to comment on that?
You can do an analysis with a DB meter, right?
Yep, you can.
Building
do analysis with
like for like.
Right.
If you see on the first page here, the comments, see this link. That link is a code interpretation from the State Fire Marshal Office that allows like for like. You guys don't know what that is. They exchange the panel due to obsolescence or multiple false alarms, which we don't like in the fire department, nor do the tenants, because then they stop listening to them and they stop heating them. So that allows the like for like replacement of the panel, like this gentleman said, and put a price tag on it. It was that much.
Sure.
Like 20-some years ago, I was in a building, a marina-style, beautiful building. I walked in, and there was like 3/4 and 1 inch EMT running all over the place, and they had put strobes in. I said, "What happened?" It looked awful. And the person that was showing me the building said, "Oh, we had to change the panel in the fire department." Said we had to upgrade the current code, which as far as I know, the ordinance never changed, so I don't know how they came to that. But I haven't seen that much anymore. Is that what we're talking about? You don't have
This has, what's
really
the date on this? 2012, we got an interpretation on that exact, because it was more expensive, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put the aesthetics over the safety either, but
This is an option.
most of these buildings are beautiful buildings from the 1920s, and the owners that did it on the cheap ran half-inch EMT all over the place. It looks terrible. But this building had 1 inch. It just destroyed the building. And that's an expense issue, there may have been a cheaper way to do it, but they said it was because the fire department at that time, and it was a while back, wouldn't let them replace like for like, and they had to upgrade the whole thing to an in-unit. But I've only seen it once or twice, so that's not the rule anymore?
You can do it voluntarily.
Yeah, it's not necessarily.
Right, okay,
That's correct. We have another option.
okay, good. Appreciate that. Thank you.
But we all would like to have it. And I think that's the
In an ideal
goal,
world, yeah.
but we're not in the business of forcing that.
Yeah. Just retrofitting things are so much harder than it's construction, you know, so it's,
Is there any other comment on this item here? This is an item we're looking at very much just because it's something that's achievable. You know, a lot of times if you have to put a new fire sprinkler system in a building, it just gets too costly because you don't know where the water supply is, how to run the water supply to the building, if the water meter is large enough. There's a lot of issues. So this is just one possibility that we're looking at that we're interested in because what was mentioned by the electrical chief too. I mean, that's the first sign is notification. So if you hear the alarm system, you know, you're notified. You can be getting out of the building.
I have one question. Just thinking about sound, is there any system in place or any code in place for folks who are deaf or hard of hearing?
Yes.
What is it? You want to know?
Oh.
It's both audible and visual device in the unit. Audible and visual, so blinking light.
Is that for new construction or for existing?
Correct. You voluntarily put it.
I'm unaware of a retroactive requirement. It's normally referred to as a strobe light. And when alarm goes off, there's depending upon the strobe, there's an intensity of a blink, and it keeps going, and it's a visual indication of an alarm condition. So it's commonly referred to as a strobe. And there's many different types, and they have different intensities. Yeah, actually, you know what? Yeah, it's a small one, but there's one right up here in the ceiling.
Ron, you want to kind of give an example of an old system and a new system?
Well, there's a significant difference between an old system and a new system.
You're right.
The old systems, you can barely see the flash. The new systems, they're so bright that there's even arguments about whether it's too bright and it causes epilepsy or epileptic condition in some people. So there's a significant difference in the old models and the new models in terms of the intensity of the flash light that's given off during an alarm condition.
And the new code, back to new stuff now, low frequency, someone mentioned that, and that's a new requirement for our occupancies. Due to some studies over the years by NFPA, it's a standard we use, 72, that children and elderly and inebriated people don't wake up to the standard frequency of an emitting alarm. So they went to this low frequency on some studies. It's a requirement in the code for new construction for our occupancies now. And it's a much greater demand on the system, the power, and more expensive.
Is there any other public comment on this issue here?
I have a suggestion.
Okay.
What we do with a lot of buildings is we do what's called plan of action. And when things become cost prohibitive, we write up this plan of action and we say, do this part in 2 years, and another 2 years, do this part. And it allows people to be able to upgrade their systems affordably. That's just something to consider. That still might be a way of making this a little easier to swallow should we decide to go down that path. But we do that, it's pretty common.
Just a question on that. Is that for structures that are out of compliance or just using old technology and you're trying to upgrade them to a new standard?
Both. I'm trying to think of the last one I signed. I think it was somebody that was doing change of use.
Okay, so it was something that possibly triggered it.
Yeah, but not always. We used to have an administrative bulletin called 3.04, and they decided not to use it as of about 6 years ago. But it basically tried to get people in compliance with the new code, and that's when they went to the like for like. So it's still sitting out there, but we don't use it, and a lot of that was it's just another tactic of making it easier for people to afford a big upgrade.
And I was just curious if there's an existing administrative mechanism to get people to upgrade if they're not already planning any other type of improvement.
Well, that's kind of weird to hash out today.
Right. I mean, a change of use definitely would.
Remodel.
All the time.
Right.
Well, not just a remodel, if it's a change of occupancy.
Right.
For instance, we had a place, it was an old office building, and they want to turn it into a giant restaurant, you know, that held 900 people. And of course, the code says, hey, guess what? You have a pretty souped up fire alarm system. In that case, they're putting it in from day one.
Would anybody like to comment on this fire safety task? The matrix here?
I just had a question.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't get the materials, I didn't get it on time, but I know that there was mention around this criteria being building specific to kind of create an invitation for it to be doable to upgrade the systems, but I wanted to see a little bit of, I wanted to understand if there was an orientation around systems that were, structures that were really out of compliance, what would be the suggestion for them? And then if there was, I know that there was mention around the use of alarms within a unit, so within the actual residential unit around the hallway. So I just wanted to have a better understanding of what is orientation in terms of it being a per building requirement, and each building has its own designation, and what would really encourage for the consideration of alarm within a unit? What would that be? What would be the criteria for that to be a suggestion of a building?
Well, these would have to be recommendations made by this body to the Board of Supervisors. It's a little confusing in the discussions because some people are talking in terms of new construction, but really the task force is geared toward existing buildings and retroactive requirements. So if you're in favor of any of these recommendations, you know, you should say so. And then at the end of the 6 meetings, we'll be taking a vote on what we're going to forward to the Board of Supervisors.
The matrix that you handed out is really just about the central hall systems, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Right. And there's nothing on the agenda that talks about the in-unit alarms, like the lady mentioned. And personally, I think that's the most important thing. I brought this up at the last meeting. Most fires, as I understand it, start in an apartment. And from reading news stories all the time, I get the impression a lot of times that people have disabled smoke alarms in that apartment. They don't wake up, they die of smoke inhalation, and the fire grows more than it would have if they had woken up and taken action. And then the building sustains more damage and maybe other people are injured. And I really think spending some time analyzing the in-unit battery operated, or what we call hardwired smoke detectors, getting that system to work better than it does would have far more benefits than most anything else we could do, because that's what's reduced the number of fires so much in San Francisco and elsewhere over the last 20 or 30 years. But as I mentioned last time, I'm in the property management business, and I started noticing early on that a great many smoke detectors were disabled in rental units because of false alarms. And I mentioned, here's an article from 2010 where the fire chief of Albany was calling for the elimination of ionization detectors, which in my opinion, the problem. I wrote to San Francisco's fire chief 20 years ago about it. I wrote a letter to the editor in 2003 about it. I mean, this is and I think the problem still exists. And California passed a law requiring 10-year battery smoke detectors in apartments last year. And people that are in property management business, I'm pretty sure we probably all complied with it, but I bet a lot of owners haven't. And I haven't had a chance to research this, but Jamie would know. I don't think, San Francisco's not enforcing that law, I don't think. The 10-year battery operated, and I have a feeling nobody's enforcing it.
Robert, where are we on that?
We require 10-year batteries. Anytime somebody puts in a new smoke detector, they have to put in one that has a 10-year battery. So slowly we're phasing in
The state law requires a non-removable battery, I think. Is that the
That's
case
the
with San
10-year
Francisco?
battery, yeah, it comes
Okay.
that way. Now, for our inspections, if somebody's missing a smoke detector or a smoke detector's broken, needs to be replaced, we're requiring those, but we're not going back and saying that they have to get rid of all the old ones. But we are phasing in all new smoke detectors are 10-year battery.
Well, I would like to have a discussion about requiring getting rid of all the old ones, because they're junk, and they're not smoke detectors, they're noisemakers, and they get disabled. And if they were in the apartments, if the 10-year ones are photoelectric, which don't give off the false alarms. And some people, I got the discussion, former fire chief of Ross, and he had the same opinion, but for different reasons about photoelectric versus ionization, because one goes off faster with different types of fires. But in my experience, they get removed in 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, particularly because they go off from cooking and showering.
Right.
They're useless. So if we replaced all of those in the apartments, and people, when the fire started in somebody's apartment, they did wake up and took action quickly, it could make a dramatic difference, I think. And at the lowest cost, it would be the easiest to implement, the fastest, and I think that should really be discussed.
Education is important with smoke detectors. People need to know where to put them. Because you're right, when there's false alarms, that's usually either the batteries don't get replaced, they make that chirping noise, and then people want to disable them completely.
Well, the 10 years,
the 10-year helps a lot
that's a
with
good
that.
thing. Although I'm getting reports from maintenance people that there's maybe a 10 or 15% defective rate in those, which is something that people need to deal with the manufacturers about. I bought some where they didn't work right out of the box, and my maintenance people are telling me they're getting calls that they start chirping, and people have to smash them with a hammer to stop them because you can't remove the battery. So that's a manufacturing problem, but they need to get feedback, from people, from city officials would be better than getting it from private citizens. But I think that's something that needs to be on the agenda for this committee, because it just could do a lot more benefit at a reasonable cost, and it can be done quickly.
I would strongly agree with those comments. There was a smoke detector ordinance in the city, I forget exactly, maybe early 90s.
It was late 80s.
Late 80s, okay. When it was mandated that these smoke detectors were installed. And the reality is that I bet you maybe 20% of them were still operational, and a lot of them were disabled for the very reason you stated. So if we were to deal with this phenomenon, other than manufacturer defects, let's take that aside. Those new battery backed up smoke detectors are an excellent way. They're not nearly as sensitive. You don't have all the problems you have with the earlier versions, and most likely would not be dismantled the way the earlier ones were. So I think that is something the committee wants to look at, because it's a simple, cost-efficient solution to a major problem in the interior of the units. And it is a big way to resolve that issue.
That was brought up last meeting too. That was very good. You brought that up last meeting. That's one of the things we'll think about. And one of the discussions we have too is that if we add smoke detectors in the buildings, is the existing system, the fire alarm system, able to handle that? So that was an item that we brought up and we're discussing. It's still an open item that we're discussing
Unit
this.
ones, that's not an issue, because they're either hooked into the house wiring or they have a battery.
Yep.
So the power isn't an issue, but the hallway ones certainly is.
But we'll bring that up as an agenda item. Smoke detectors is going to be a good discussion there. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment on the item number 4, review of the fire alarm requirements? Okay.
I would bring up one thing I think is useless. I mean, I don't know how important it would be, but depending upon the decision the commission here makes in order to provide us with more protection. is if you beefed up the smoke detectors in the units, you may want, most of these buildings only have one pull station and it's at the front door. And the idea, I believe, was you're running out of the building, you see it at the front door, you pull it so you can notify everybody else in the building. You may want to say, okay, would it be of value to put a pull station on every floor or at every exit on the floor? I don't know. I'm just bringing it up so it's not a lost item, depending on what you decide.
Some buildings have them every floor and some don't. What's the difference?
Because they were there originally. The system that was there would add a pull station and a bell on every floor, and then it added the smoke detector, so they maintained the pull stations. But on the new systems that went in under that ordinance, it was just the one pull station at the front door.
Rich, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, he's correct about that. Yeah. And then if old buildings do have sprinklers, that's waived because the sprinkler system activates, it's all part of the system. But that require most of them don't have sprinkler systems.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's just a switch.
Yeah, that's correct. Smoke detection in the unit connected to the fire alarm, existing fire alarm. Lot to that. A lot of analysis involved in that. Can it work? Can your alarm panel handle it? Is your alarm panel monitored to central station? Which is another monthly fee.
And not these old buildings.
That actually call the fire department for. It's an automatic detection system, automatic dialer, all that. That's deeper and deeper.
Which brings up another possibility, which is to monitor all systems. It doesn't take a whole lot to put a dialer and connect it to most panels. But there, it's just another.
Is that on here?
Yeah.
My main business, I've got some office buildings, that was a major activity, was those panels and you check.
I had it on the whole office building.
No, I don't deal in office buildings, so I don't know. It's on the original there.
We can
get out of that.
It's an option.
Yeah.
I don't know, can the old panels sustain that monitor?
In most cases, there's usually a yes.
Okay.
There's always a way, even if you said, okay, you can use current switches. We've done it with ancient buildings.
Toggle.
Where you just put the wire for the trouble and the power and then the alarm loop, and then as soon as the current flows, it goes into the communicator.
Even on a trouble signal?
Yep. Trouble for power, that's all.
Okay, item number 5, post-fire investigation. Discussion of possible action regarding data gathering. Let's start off on that.
Well, this was just some discussions we've been having about trying to collect data from fires and what sort of information the fire department is transmitting to Department of Building Inspection after fires. At what threshold, what level of damage should they? Should it be a fire that's got $1,000 worth of damage, or a fire that's got $20,000 worth of damage? What can we learn, about how the system performed in the building, or didn't perform?
Okay. Right now, we're looking at different communication between the fire department and the building department just on gathering data. As far as the fire, the amount of damage of the fire, that we're aware of it, the building department's aware of it. And we're looking at, what's the parameters of what we want to report in a fire, and maybe set up a database to kind of see the history of these fires as they progress, of what's the problem with the fires and what we could correct in the future. So we're working with the fire department on that. We do have some current information that we share, and we're working on other parameters where we could share more information, so we could find out more information about these fires and the sources of the fires, and and see if there's a consistency in the problem with these fires. Rich, would you like to comment on that a little bit?
Correct. So how this started was, when you go to a fire, the investigator asks questions of the occupants. What did you hear? Interview them. Not all fires require a formal fire investigation from arson. And arson would be the most complete investigation or report of a fire. We have smaller fires that on-scene personnel can handle. And there's a national reporting system called NFIRS, National Fire Incident Report System, where they have 100 drop-down boxes that you can add in a lot of these questions that they wanted to know. Was there smoke detection? Property loss value? Contents? Structure fire, trash fire, auto fire, all those. Those are accessible through our arson, or actually through the fire department. So we can query it. In fact, I just did a quick one on structured fires for the last 2 years in the city, and this is the dots here that around the whole city. But I can query certain parameters to make this happen, and by addresses and by dates. I think this started about fire behavior. Is that the you guys wanted to know on how much damage happens? Every fire is different. This gentleman's correct about the smoke detection. Someone runs out of their building, doesn't tell anybody, leaves the door open, smoke travels down the common corridor or hallway, and makes a little fire into a big fire.
Sets off the hallway detectors.
Eventually.
Can I ask a question on the database?
Yes.
So by structure fire, what's the threshold? So someone's got a can of beans on the stove and it's smoke and the fire department responds and...
You can narrow it down to single alarm, second alarm.
Okay, so... And then
less than $10,000, more than $10,000, anything like that.
Every time an engine company rolls on scene and there's smoke, that
It's not
counts?
necessarily a working fire. We would probably call that burnt food. That's separate.
BF?
Burnt food is what we call it.
And what
We don't consider that a structured fire.
just
Unless it got
just a dinner problem.
the drapes and then the window.
And then what form is the database in? Now, I'm not looking for something technical mumbo jumbo, but I mean, is it in a paper form, in a binder? Is it in a queryable electronic database?
It's an electronic database, yes. They have a printout for every incident that could be available to the public.
Okay, so it's electronic and it's searchable.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So back to this, I think we already have something in place. So if you guys wanted to query some info, just let me know.
And we're also looking at, as far as the parameters there, we're working with our MIS just to kind of get we still don't have a database yet. We're still trying to find out, how many units we have, 5 or more units, 16 or more units, kind of establish the parameter that you were talking about earlier. We still don't know. We're still trying to get a fact-finding information, how many thousands of these buildings exist, just so it's reachable what we propose in the future there. So we're working on it. Is it 5 units? Is it going to be 7 units? Is it going to be 12 units? We're still working on that database here, but we are gathering that information. We're hoping to have that information for this meeting, but we still don't have it yet.
The CAPS task force did all that research a few years ago, so we can try calling those guys. They probably still have it. The seismic retrofit.
Okay.
I think they're headquarters in City Hall now, EDI, but that current ordinance applies to 5 units and up. They did a lot of number crunching for how many different kinds of buildings there were and that sort of thing. So they might have it, or they have it, who and then, IT knows how to do it quickly.
Sure. Right now, our IT is currently, working on the Acela program, so, we've got high priority on that, but we are working on that. And we could reach and get that seismic database. We're doing the soft storage program now, so we could check with them on that.
Yeah, they might have the data still at their fingertips.
Okay. But that is a discussion with the fire department and the building department. Is what data do we need? What data would be, advantageous to have to see where the source of the fire is, what the fires in the future, what we could do in the future to prevent that. They could set it up on a spreadsheet just so we kind of know the dynamics of what's happening on a lot of these fires that we can look at in the future.
so it's great to know about the database and that it's searchable. You know, the one thing that we see a lot in our office and Lieutenant Counselor, but what we understand is that both the fire department and DBI are code enforcers in some way or another. But I'm wondering what is existing information that is communicated regarding, let's say the fire department goes to recertify some part of the fire extinguishers and the license itself, and you notice that there's structural damage that maybe DBI needs to know about because in the future this might cause a structural fire. So what is it, what are the tenets of the things that you communicate currently to kind of forewarn DBI or even say, hey, we might need your support to do an inspection in this building? Or do you not? And are you considering that as part of, or do you think that would be helpful?
We do have a system in place already for that, for major fires. Little fires, room and contents, our suppression people are trained to see if any structural members have been damaged due to fire.
I'm saying before there's a fire. I'm saying when you go to recertify a fire alarm, for example, and you notice structural damage, and you want to give a heads up to DBI.
Sure, we can do that.
Hey, you might need to, is there something in place right now?
Just word of mouth, following up, being diligent, you know. Building department has a complaint process on those things on their website, and we do too.
Housing and building, we have a referral system. You know, if we go out to do it, say if there's a complaint on a job and we go out and do an investigation and there's a hazard or a fire hazard, we could CC the fire department or we could CC housing department. So we do have that in place right now. So, you know, if there is a, say, anonymous complaint or any other complaint, if housing has a complaint where there might be a building issue, they would refer it to us. If we see an issue that might involve fire, we could refer it to them. So we do have it in our referral system right now. Is there any other discussion about data gathering? Would you like to see?
If DBI is looking up a property or if the fire department is looking up a property, can they see if there's an NOV from the other department? So if DBI is doing research on a property, can they see if the fire department has an existing NOV on that property?
On the Acela system that we're working on now, it should have that transparency. We currently, as far as the data from the fire, we may not get data from the fire unless they give it to us there. We ask them for it, they have information for us. But as far as DBI, you can go to sfgov.org and the complaint tracking system tells all the complaints and the actions of what's going on. As far as interconnecting the agencies, that's what the new Acela program is supposed to be working towards. So that we could have transparency with fire, we could have transparency with planning department, and get.
What's the target date for that?
Well, we're working desperately on it, and hopefully, we don't have a date set right now. We have meetings set on it, but we are going forward with that. So in the near future, all I could say is in the
Commissions
near
approved
future.
it and everything?
Well, the building commission has, but have the other departments?
I'm not sure where that's at right now. That's still in discussion, so, but that's eventually what's
So
gonna happen at one phase.
Right now, we don't have
Right now, we don't have it. Correct. We're working towards that, and we don't know how complicated it is within the system.
I
We
get
still
it.
have to
I
get the
get it.
system going and then see how far we can expand it too, so.
it. Get it, I get it.
It's in the future, but it's being discussed. Okay. Is there any public comment on item number 5? Okay, item number 6, future meeting topics. Is there any future topics that we'd like to bring for the next meeting? Okay, we have smoke detectors. I know we're gonna be going into fire alarm systems pretty soon too. We're trying to look at the, controlled monitoring system first, and eventually we're gonna go into the fire alarms. So that'll be a topic too. So,
Dan,
yes.
housing code requirements versus building and fire code requirements.
Okay.
That needs to be, Robert here has done a really great matrix that compares the two. And I think you need to look at that a little closer.
Okay. And I know we discussed to make it too on the UL listings of some of these control panels, who's testing them and certifications of them. So that's a item that we'll be bringing up in the future too. Okay. Yep.
fast as possible, unless it lives somewhere online, but is there a matrix around the communication that does exist between the two departments, or the DBI and the fire department? Is there a matrix that explains this is at the point where we do referrals or we kind of flags things?
We have, within DBI, I mean, I'll let Rich speak on fire, but as far as DBI, we have a complaint tracking system. If you go to sfgov.org, has a complaint tracking.
I'm talking about the communication is established already between the two departments, between the fire department and DBI. Is there a matrix about what is the existence of communication?
Okay. Well, the existing system is like more interagency where they report to us when there's a fire. Like we have an emergency system within DBI when it gets like above 2 alarm fire that they call us. We actually go to the site of the fire. So there's a system right now where they have central, when they have a larger fire, they notify DBI. DBI inspection goes over there and they still cite the building, if it's safe or not, if, permit required, if there's structural damage involved, there's issues in that. And they also send us a list. Pardon me?
I'm wondering.
It's not.
Probably not.
About, like,
No.
protocol policy.
Probably not.
Okay,
No.
that's all.
Okay. But there is interagency systems in effect right now. It's just not like online what we do, but I mean, when there is notification of a larger fire, they notify us. There's an NOV process involved in this. That's intact right now.
It just might be helpful to have it as a policy and a protocol that it's established.
Yeah, we're working towards that. Okay.
Are you talking about what happens after a fire or regarding?
Even before and after.
Okay.
Is it,
Track of the complaint from start to finish.
Complain about a
Every,
fire system or, yeah.
whatever department it belongs to.
you want to comment on your tracking
So
system?
yeah, basically the problem is the fire department doesn't have their inspection and complaint available online for the public. You can come down to our office and look up an address that's available, just make an appointment to look at records. But the ease of DBI's website is excellent to track a complaint per address or building permit number. Fire department's we're working on the Excel as well. But we do keep it on internally, but you can come down and visit.
What's the next step for the data? Is it to determine exactly what type of data we want, or is it to actually produce the database that we can all look at? What's the next step?
There's two data parallels going here. One is talking about how did the building perform during a fire, and the other one is what type of buildings are more at risk. And we did put inquiries out to CAPS people and to our MIS to try to get a ballpark number for this meeting today, and we did not get information. So we'll try to have it for next time.
Okay. Is there any other future meeting topics that someone would like to bring up to the next meeting? Okay, is there any comment on item number 6? Okay. Okay, item number 7, general public comment. Anyone like to make a comment?
I think there should be some testing of this audibility of bells and that sort of thing, so I hear the bells in the being tested, so I'm in the hall and they seem really loud, but I might sleep in the apartment, so I think we need some real data on that. It's a 12-unit building of studios. It's different than a 16 of Romeo's where you have a long apart, flat, and the alarms are way up front in that staircase. We need some real data to know what the problem is and how to fix it.
It's hard to get that data right now, okay? But what it is audibility. I mean, are the people in the units hearing it? That's where we're working with
We have to sample 100 buildings or something, and somebody would have to have some money to do a test. I would think. A sample. But it would be worth it, I think, to know what instead of guessing.
I know that Supervisor Wiener's office has a set aside of a pool of money related to code enforcement, so we may be able to talk to him about, doing some testing. hiring third party to go out and test. I think it's worthwhile to do that.
Okay, that could be a recommendation from the task force group, when we gather all this information.
Yeah.
That we could do some testing, just to back up our suggestions.
Yeah. Because I think, as Jamie or somebody else brought up, or our electrical inspector here, the challenge we always have in San Francisco is every building is its unique character, and that's why we love it here, is because of all the different architectural and layout and everything. But doing code, it makes it really difficult, because it's not like we're dealing in Emeryville where everything's exactly the same. It's all different. So I think if we could put some money into doing some studying. I think also, I don't know if it was brought up before. If it was when I was out, I apologize. But there's so much modern technology that we have now around the area of alarm systems and fire and all internet-based things, and like a Megan's Law alert that goes out but goes to people's cell phones. So I think we should look at what we're going to provide for the next generation, not so much where we were before. You know what I mean? And so I think we should spend some time in studying what new technology is out there. So when we upgrade these buildings and we invest $5,000 to $10,000, we're doing it for the future and not for the past.
All right. Thank you very much. The next meeting will be September 22nd at 5:30 p.m. And it's going to be in 1660 Mission Street, the building part of DBI, in the second floor, room 2001. If you have any suggestions too, please feel free to call the housing department, call Jamie, or call myself, call fire, and let us know. This is something that we're looking at. Okay, thank you very much.